Welcome back for Season 3 of Legal Wellbeing in Action. We're excited to announce our new 2023 campaign, Wellbeing: A Deeper Dive. For 2023, we're going to be focusing on the journey that involves the process of looking inward, taking an honest self-inventory of our strengths, challenges, values, and really belief systems. We'll be exploring that internal landscape, including thoughts of how we feel and our bodies in an effort to understand the inside state, outside appearance, and if they're congruent. Non-congruence is wearing a mask and potentially deceiving ourselves. So in this first episode, we are joined by William Slease, the Professional Development Program Director for the State Bar of New Mexico. In addition to his duties at the State Bar, he serves as an adjunct professor at the University of New Mexico School of Law, where he teaches the 1L Lab and Ethics and serves as a practice skills evaluator for the Evidence Trial Practice Skills course. Beside him today is Ms. Pamela Moore, the Director of the Professional Programs Group and a member of the New Mexico Wellbeing Committee. Ms. Moore and Mr. Slease will be exploring well-being as an inside-out job that we don't really often have the courage to get curious about. The conversation focuses on some of life's difficult questions, such as, are you really happy and thriving in that relationship, or just pretending you are because looking at it would be too uncomfortable? What about your job? Where in your life do you feel trapped? What resentments do you have that you refuse to relinquish? What belief systems do you hold about yourself that keep you stuck? We hope this podcast gets you thinking. We'd love to hear your thoughts on it. For now, I'm going to turn it over to our two speakers, and as always, we hope you enjoy.
All right, Tanessa, thank you for that introduction. And so as Tanessa said, I'm Pam Moore, and Director of the Lawyer Assistance Program and what's now the Professional Programs Group here at the State Bar of New Mexico. And I am joined today by Bill Slease, who is the Director of the Professional Development Program. And Bill and I are kicking off the 2023 campaign, well-being campaign, with a topic that is near and dear to my heart. I think it's what we don't talk about that we should talk about. And it is what really is at the heart of well-being. And anyway, so let me start this off with a little bit of history of how we came about how we landed on this topic. So I've been at the State Bar for about 5 years now, a little over 5 years, and actually in the well-being space for much longer than that, as a therapist, and got my master's in counseling over 10 years ago, and so well-being has been a part of my life for a pretty long time. But what I have noticed in being in this space is that unless you're going to see a therapist or you're doing some therapy, some counseling, what we talk about outside of therapy and counseling in terms of what is wellness or what is well-being are the typical things that you hear, like, I need to get 8 hours of sleep. Why don't you, or it's mostly preached in presentations, right? Get 8 hours of sleep. Make sure you exercise most days of the week. We even read it in articles. A lot of times when we talk to legal professionals, lawyers are like, turn your phone off, or don't answer emails after 8 p.m. Don't answer texts after 8 p.m. Make sure you're taking your vacation days, etc. And it really got me thinking that we can do all those things and we can still not be well on the inside. We can still be pretty messy and miserable, dare I say, or just not feel good, even though on the outside we look as though we're well, we've got it all together, we're healthy, we're happy, we're content, etc. And so, the last couple of years since we've been doing these campaigns, we have talked about those things on the outside. With our first one, what a healthy lawyer looks like. And then last year we talked about what a healthy legal community looked like. And so this year we really wanted to take a little bit deeper dive into really how do you achieve wellness, well-being, whatever that means to each person, because I think it's totally different for each person. And sometimes, a lot of times, well-being really does require a exploration or an investigation about you and doing the inner work and exploring your internal landscape to really understand what's going on. And so let me just stop there. I think Bill and I are both, or at least I know I'm going to get into a little bit of my own personal story, because I absolutely have a story around this and how I got to where I am in terms of maybe exploring my internal landscape. But Bill, let me go ahead and invite you in and
Sure.
your thoughts on what I had, what I said.
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. The history of well-being movement really did start with what I think of as sort of a foundational layer. Sometimes I think of it as hierarchy of needs, which isn't exactly the right fit, but there's some things you have to do just to survive, and things like getting exercise, things like sleeping, things like having a good diet and trying to have a social life and a relationship and monitoring your technology use. And absolutely, those are all important. We're not saying that you should not do those things. In fact, I think if you're not doing those things, it's difficult then to get past that level of need to that next level, which is how do you dive in deeper? How do you look internally to what's really going on with you? As I heard one lawyer describe it to me recently, I was satisfied, but I wasn't fulfilled, and I wasn't thriving, and I wasn't really blossoming as a person because something else was going on. And you're right. I think we are going to talk about each of our own journeys. I will just tell you from my own perspective that if you had looked at from the outside looking in over a good period of my life, you would say that by at least Western standards, wow, it's all going well for you. You've got a nice, lovely spouse, and you've got a great kids, and you're living in a good neighborhood, and you make a decent living, and you've got a good, steady job, and you've got the car in the driveway, and all of that's going on. And I would sometimes describe myself as, yeah, but I'm really just a duck on the pond. So what you're seeing on the surface, that calm, serene, everything seems to be going well, underneath there's a lot of churning going on. And I would often find ways to sort of distract myself, or if the distractions weren't working, I would be distancing myself from really turning inside to try to figure out, what is all that churning about? Why am I feeling that way inside? And so I think that's what we wanted this year's campaign to focus on. And I think it really does get to that next layer, that next level. How do you really start, as the one lawyer said, not just being satisfied, but really being fulfilled, really thriving, really going forward and expanding in a way that you really are all about being well and what that really means on a much deeper level.
Right, I totally agree. Great, thank you for adding that. That really resonates. So let me dive in a little bit about my own personal story and how I really started thinking about this. So I will tell you that when I entered the workforce as an engineer back in 1993, that was a long time ago. And I got married right at the same time I started working at Intel. For the next 20 plus years, I would say I didn't start off being miserable, but I increasingly became more miserable on the inside and had no idea why. So I was an engineer. I had a great job at Intel, was married to another engineer. Several years went by. We had 2 kids, a boy and a girl. We had a house, 2 cars, all that. I ended up, when my daughter was born, my second was born, I ended up being a stay-at-home mom for a while and was actively involved in the school, did everything at the school with my kids. And I exercised, almost every day. And so you looking at me on the outside, you would think, wow, like that, in the United States or in Western society, that's good. They've achieved it. They've gotten there. Like they're living the American dream. Also went to church every Sunday. Not that that's whether or not you're well. But we basically, what I look back now, and I was absolutely wearing a mask. Every single day I was wearing a mask, and I would, on the outside, I would look like, and you would see that it looked like I was doing well, but on the inside, I was not happy. I was not content. I was not at peace. The marriage wasn't great, and I didn't know why. I didn't know why I was so unhappy, and I didn't know why I couldn't fix my marriage. And it wasn't until, and honestly, I when I thought about going back into the workforce, I could have gone back, and I did for a little while, into engineering, but I was still kind of miserable. I mean, making good money, but I was like, I'm just not happy, and I don't know why. And that's when I really started thinking I need to go get a master's in counseling. And, on the surface, I told myself it's to help people. And I think that's what, I've met a lot of counselors that say, I just want to help people, but I don't believe that's why all counselors go into counseling. And that certainly wasn't the case for me. I needed to go into counseling so that I could figure out what was going on with me and why I wasn't happy. And ultimately, I did through education, through therapy. I started seeing my own counselor, and I had seen a counselor before I even started my master's in counseling, and still couldn't figure it out. Started reading a lot more books, and started saying, oh my gosh, based on some things, and how I grew up, I am starting to recognize that is why I think the way I think, that is why I behave the way I behave, and that is why things come out of my mouth that I never thought would come out of my mouth, or behaviors I would see, like, oh my gosh, my dad just showed up, and I never wanted to be like my dad, but here he is, yelling at my kids or something like that. And so I really started to say, I really need to figure this out, because I'm on a trajectory that I do not like, and I do not want to live like this. And ultimately, I would say I felt like I was in a prison. I felt like I was in a prison cell of my own making, and I didn't know who had the key, and I needed to figure that out. And ultimately, we are the only ones that have that key to our own cell. And it's about, for me, it was about, what is that key, and how do I turn it and get myself out of here so that I have freedom of choice? And by choice, I mean I am responding the way I want to respond. I am behaving the way I envision myself behaving. I am what I am doing and what I'm saying is how I envision how I want to be in this world. It's the person I want to show up as. And that I said, there's a lot in there in terms of why we don't do that. But that's kind of how I got, in a nutshell, to saying, wow, I had all that and it all looked good, but it wasn't good on the inside, and I really needed to make some major changes. And it's what I didn't know I didn't know. I really needed to figure some things out that were running unconsciously under the surface that I had no idea was there until I started doing that deeper dive into myself.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, the way you described it, sort of this progression over time, I'm wondering if there were sort of one or two moments where you realized, wait a minute, there's something else going on, sort of a what I'd call a triggering event. I know for me, I spent a good chunk of the legal career in particular, where certain conflicts, certain events would cause me this just great internal upheaval, probably disproportionate to what was really going on in front of me. And so, I would sort of get way into my own head. I would spin out these sort of scenarios that probably were just fantastic, that would never come to pass, but were so dark and destructive. And And yet I'd find a way to muscle through them, or I would turn internally and I would be very self-critical and self-judgmental about what the hell's wrong with me. Why am I not just powering through this? I'm smarter than this, because I'd always want to try to drop back on the intellect and say, I can think my way through this as opposed to feel. And it really wasn't until much later where I think a combination of things, and I have two distinct memories. I remember one sort of event in particular that was really, really troubling to me. And I woke up thinking my head has gone completely offline. My amygdala is running the show. And for people who understand the amygdala, I'm in complete fight, flight, freeze up mode. I am not functioning at a higher level anymore. And a spouse who recognized the same thing and said, something's got to change. There's something else going on underneath you that it's having these kind of impacts. And for me, I think it was an accumulation of years and years and years of just distracting myself and keeping it at arm's length, self-critical, the whole 9 yards. And it wasn't till that sort of triggering event where I stopped and turned and looked and realized, yeah, I'm still going to the gym. Yeah, I'm still eating okay. Yeah, I'm still sleeping well. I've got to go do more. I've got to go figure out what's at the heart of this. And I would say that's been really within the last several years that I finally turned back into myself and started looking at what's underlying that, where I was going to deal with that underlying issue. And I one of the things I know you and I have talked about in the past, Pam, it's for me, I've never been good, and I didn't realize this at the time because I'm in a profession where this happens. I was never good at sitting with the discomfort. I wanted to get to a place of comfort immediately and feel this sense of urgency, almost panic to get there, which was what was, I think, in large part taking me offline. And so it's been doing that work, that deeper work to try to get comfortable with holding discomfort in a space where I can be sort of ironically comfortable with it. And it doesn't happen alone. It's working with a therapist. It's working with friends who understand, who can help hold some of that space for you, who can make it safe for you to sit in that discomfort and to get comfortable with it in a way that now you can really start unpackaging it and really dealing with it on that deeper level. But I don't know if for you there was that sort of triggering moment, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but or if it was just that progression over time. And as you said, I think everybody takes their own journey. Most people I've talked to, though, they have that one moment that is just crystal in their head. We've got a friend who talks about it as stepping over the magic line. For me, that's what it was. I remember a particular morning where I finally stepped over the magic line.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I do remember one moment I was in Target with my kids, and they were pretty young, probably elementary school age, and running around and just, I was getting more and more frustrated. And I remember yelling at them or saying something, and my dad's words came out of my mouth. And, I swore to myself I would never be like my dad. And so for all those that don't know you, my dad was an alcoholic my entire life. And him and I, from my teenage years on, we didn't get along very well. But when my dad came out of my mouth and I said, oh, my God, my dad just showed up. He wasn't physically there, but my dad just showed up. And it's me. And I am doing and saying the things that he did and said, even though I told myself I would never be that parent. And I think that I remember being terrified. I remember being so scared because it felt like I had no control. I can't control myself. And if I can't control myself, then I'm like, who am I? Right? Who am I? What am I in control over? And it was, if I can't control when I get frustrated or, when I'm in certain triggering situations, if it's more of an automatic thing that I say and do, and it's not nice, and it's landing on top of these two kids that I love dearly, who am I and what kind of parent am I going to end up being? And as I rolled the tape forward in my head, I said, if I don't do something, I will become the parent that I don't want to be. I will become a human being that I don't want to be, that I never saw myself being. And so that was really one of the, that was a instrumental moment where I really started reading a lot more. I mean, I think it was that was before I was in counseling, but I really started thinking about going into counseling at that time. I also, I didn't even know, YouTube videos. I didn't know what to look up. I had no clue what to look up on YouTube, or I had no idea what book to go buy. And it wasn't until I started talking to people and I did start getting the education I needed that I said, oh, I can go explore boundaries. Like, what's a boundary? I didn't even know what that is. What's emotional intelligence? I don't know. I've never even heard those two words put together before. And so, I was really very naive when it came to what was going on inside. And yeah, I mean, I was just surviving until I thought, if I roll the tape forward, this is not going to end well. This isn't going well for me or for my kids or, for my spouse. And so that is, what scared the hell out of me and told me that I had to do something different.
So do you think it's possible, if you're trying to do sort of deeper work, really get to some core issues that are troubling you, that might be interfering with your ability to be well, to flourish? Mm-hmm. Is it something you can do on your own? Do you really have to have somebody help? Are we saying, well, it's sort of full service employment for a Full Employment Act for counselors and psychologists and psychiatrists? I mean, I'll just tell you my own perspective is I can only get so. Actually, it sort of really analogizes well, I think, to exercise. I can watch YouTube videos on how to perform certain exercises and watch my form. I can build a routine. I can get to a certain point in my progression. But if I don't get a personal trainer involved, I'm not going to get much further. So for me, the same thing I think is true with my emotional health, my emotional well-being. I can get to a point on my own, but having somebody professionally to assist helps hold that space. But I don't know. What's your thought? Can somebody do it on their own? Because there's plenty of people who, again, on the surface appear to thrive and have seemed to find a way to do it. But
yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah. So, whether it's a therapist or, a friend that you trust, I mean, I think you can. I don't think that you can do that deeper dive work all on your own. So only reading books, only whatever, watching YouTube videos, and only doing that. I think that we learn by being in relation to others. And I think we also, there's something about speaking shame, speaking guilt, speaking, what's miserable to you, what's vulnerable, being vulnerable and speaking about that does unlock something inside of you. It helps our brain to process. It helps us to process. It's getting it out so I'm not holding it in as a secret. Because when I hold it in, even if I'm reading about it, but I'm not telling anybody about it, and I don't feel safe in somebody holding that space for me and then having a conversation about it, I really can't ever let it go. It's not really going to go anywhere. I mean, this is what I've seen in my own personal journey. And, does it have to be a professional? It doesn't have to be, but it does have to be somebody that is not going to be judgmental, that is not going to defend, that is not going to tell you you're wrong or you shouldn't be feeling that. It is really somebody that is you're going to plop something on the table that is terrifying to plop on the table, right? It's very personal. And you are going to expose your pink underbelly to this person. And if that person is able to hold that vulnerability and help you process it and not judge you for it, whoever that is, that's really the best. I think that's how we process things, and that's how we can go a little deeper we get it out. Brene Brown calls it shame gremlins. And I actually started calling my mind shame gremlins too. I would plop out what I was struggling with, or like you said, those negative thoughts, that critic in my head. I am absolutely my own worst enemy. You're stupid. You don't know what you're doing. You are a bad mom. You're this. And I would plop that out on, when I say plop, I would verbalize that and put it out there between my therapist and I, and just getting it out there was a relief. But then having the conversation with, where did that come from, and tell me what that feels like and what's underneath that. And that all helped that shame gremlin not be this huge monster, but be much smaller. And like you said, so for me, the shame gremlin never went away. It never goes away. It pops up from now and then. I can feel it. You're stupid. I feel that one a lot, but it doesn't have the grip or the claws or the hooks in me like it used to. And the hooks used to be, you are this and don't tell anybody about it.
Right.
Because you won't belong. People will think, people will laugh at you. They'll judge you. And so it doesn't have that power over me that it used to. But I really believe that we do that deeper work with somebody else.
Yeah, and I think I get back to the exercise analogy. I think having somebody else to help you, is my form good? Is this routine good? But there's the other half of it, right? You also have to do the work yourself, right? You having somebody to help you, to help hold the space, to help guide you, that's good, but it really is more, in my mind, sort of a guide. You have to be intentional about what you're doing. I'm intentionally wanting to deal with this. It's going to be painful. I'm going to intentionally look at it, and I'm going to deal with that pain. And I'm going to do the work, some of the techniques, some of the suggestions they have, and some of the stuff I've read and some of the stuff I've seen online, right? For me, it's you take all that package together, as opposed to, if you'd asked me 20 years ago, I would have said, well, if I go to a therapist, they're going to tell me how to be better, right? And it's going to be like a magic pill almost, and tomorrow I'll be better. And I can just kick back and passively let it happen. That's not how it's going to work, right? If you're going to do the deep dive, the deep work, if you're going to reach for that well-being, that holistic view of your life, it's hard work and it's intentional work, and you're going to have to put in that time. And that's why, for me, it always helps me to analogize it to doing the exercise, because if you want to have that tone in your body, fine. You can't just go to the trainer and he says, well, do this many bench presses and this many sit-ups, and then you say, oh great, I know how to do all that, but you don't actually do any of it. How do you get anywhere? So you have to combine it with really the motivation, and also doing the hard work when you have that help, that training, that guide who shows you the way.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, no. And most people only go see a therapist 1 hour a week or 1 hour every other week. And so, for me, in between the sessions, I was researching, I was reading, I was, listening to people online that were the experts in whatever, in this area and that area. For me, one of the things that I had to dive into was being the adult child of an alcoholic. And so there's, what's called the Big Red Book. I read that and I was like, oh my gosh, that led me down a whole bunch of different, avenues to go research. And so you're right, when I would meet with my therapist, I would walk in with brand new information. I would walk in and go, okay, this is what I found out. I want to talk about this. Right? I want to unpack this today. I want to uncover this today. And, it's a very courageous act to say, we are diving into this today that I found out about myself that I want to unpack and uncover. And so you're right, whether, if we use that gym analogy, you meet with a personal trainer, but then you have 5 other days a week or whatever, all those other days where you have to get in there and do the work. And then maybe you also go to some group classes, right? So you're doing group classes as well. And so you are in charge of also telling your trainer, I want to work more on this, or I want to work more on that. This is what I want my body to look like. This is how I want to feel. And so this is what I know. And now how can you help me? What's one more thing you can tell me to do?
Right.
To get me there. Yeah.
And the other piece for me too is learning more recently that it's okay to have those slips, right? It would be like historically, if there was a slip, it's like, oh, well, clearly I didn't do the work. I suck. And I'd get back to that negative voice you talked about earlier, right? And it would stick those claws deep in, and it's like, yeah, you are worthless. Look how you can't commit to this. Look how you can't get any better. We're going to just stay right where we're at. And realizing, I'm going to have the occasional slips. I'm going to backslide a little. I got to get back up. I got to dust myself off. For me, the analogy has been I've got to parent myself or grandparent myself, which resonates even more with me. I would pick up my 5-year-old or 3-year-old granddaughter if they're crying, and I'm not going to tell them, buck up. Why are you crying? This isn't that big a deal. Do better. I'm going to realize that maybe they had a moment that was unpleasant for them, and I'm going to let them sit in that unpleasantness and help them through it. And then they're going to dust themselves off and move forward. It's okay to treat yourself that way, right? It's part of that process. You're going to have those slips, those times when it doesn't feel very good, where you've made a mistake. And turning to yourself, fixing it, and trying to fixing it in the sense if there's anybody else involved, you want to take care of that. But in terms of yourself, being forgiving of the slips, I think actually helps you progress, as opposed to being so hard on yourself, critical of yourself, judgmental on yourself when you have those slips.
Right. Right. And I love when you talked about, so that is sitting in the uncomfortableness, right? I look at, I guess now I look at life and I think we are not supposed to be happy all the time. It's just not realistic. We are not perfect. There's nobody that's perfect, whatever perfect even means, whatever normal means. So whatever I'm going through is normal. And it is a part of life. And today, or maybe, the last hour, I'm sad, or I'm mad, or I'm anxious, or I'm concerned, or whatever way I'm feeling is okay. It's energy in our body, and it is not always going to be happy. So, for me, it's about riding. It's a marathon. It's riding all of the waves that come my way, all of those emotional waves, all those feelings, riding them all. And at the end of the day, the end of the hour, the end of the minute, knowing that I'm going to be okay, that this will pass, this uncomfortable energy in my body that doesn't feel great. And I also, know enough about myself, I call it taking my temperature, is that when those uncomfortable feelings come up, I am asking myself, what's that about? Where did that come from? Is there something I need to look at here? What triggered that? And so I'm not done. I will never be done doing that internal work. I will always be saying what's underneath, what's going on right now, whatever situation I'm in, whatever person's in front of me, there may be, a feeling of anxiety that comes up. And so I'm like, why am I feeling anxious right now? Oh, I know, I have to go give this presentation. That's why I'm feeling anxious. Well, what's underneath that? Well, you're not feeling good enough right now. You don't think you're a good presenter. Maybe you don't think you know what you're talking about. But if I can look at that and I can get to the bottom of why I'm feeling that, then it's less potency in my body. And then you're exactly right. I have to self-soothe around that. You know what you're doing. You got this. It's okay to be anxious. And how can you come in confidently and show up the way you want to show up, even though on the inside you may not be feeling 100% confident. And sometimes I'll just say that, I do want to be congruent on the inside and the outside. And so, a lot of times I will just say, I am totally nervous right now, or I'm feeling this right now. And I also find that people respond better when you are vulnerable and you are honest and you are authentic, because 99.9% of the time, somebody's going to resonate with that and go, you know what, me too. Me too.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny you mentioned marathon. I always think of it as, it's not a snapshot; it's a movie, right? So you got to stay till the end and see how this turns out, and it's going to turn out okay. And so that analogy works for me, especially in the times that sometimes are a little more difficult. Well, that's happens to be where we're at in the movie, right? So I think it's clearly worthwhile. I know a lot of times you refer to, you talked about being congruent. You talk about head, heart, gut alignment. And at the end of the day, that's really what I know I'm striving for in terms of when I feel like that's when I'm well. That's when things are feeling, and it's not always that they're great. It still may be uncomfortable, but my head, my heart, my gut are all in that same line. And that feels to me like it's well-being, it's flourishing. It's not having that internal conflict. It's not having that brain offline. It's not having that tightness in my chest or in my stomach that's just turning around, even though on the outside, everything looks fine. Everything looks zen.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, no, and I when I was working with a coach for a while, I used to bring in these big questions and plop them down and say, this is what I want to talk about today. And she would always ask me, how will you know when we get there? How will you know that we've gotten to the answer that you want, or the answer you're looking for? And I really had to think about that for the first couple of times she asked me, because I thought, I have no idea. But after a while, it felt like alignment in my body. And so then my answer was always, I'll know because my head, heart, and gut will be aligned. And a lot of times our heads are telling us one thing, and our heart and our gut are telling us something different. And so we think, logically, I should be doing this, but my heart and gut are telling me to go a different direction. It could be a relationship, question or struggle. It could be, should I take this job or that job? It could be any number of things. But when your head and your heart and your gut are aligned. And so, for me, one of the quotes I love is, what should I do? You lead with your heart and your gut and let your brain follow with the how. So what is my decision? My decision should be with my heart and my gut, and then the brain comes along with, how do I do it?
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it.
And so when I can do that, effectively, the decisions that I make, the choices that I make, how I show up in the world feel good. They feel right.
Yeah, they feel genuine.
Absolutely. For me, they feel like, yes, that was the right thing to do. That was the right choice to make. More often, all the times where my head and heart told me to do something different, but my brain said, no, we're going in this direction, it has not turned out well.
Yeah. So, my hope is that as we have other people involved in the legal community come forward in the next several months, they can share with us their vision of what it means to get to that deeper level, that deeper dive. And I think it's, as you said at the very beginning when we were talking, it's an individual journey for everybody. So I don't think either of us are saying, okay, do it this way, and that's the magic answer. It's what resonates for each person. I think for me, the more critical thing is be intentional about it, demand of yourself. And I don't mean demand in sort of a judgment way. I mean, it's okay to expect that you can flourish, that you can be well. You've got to be intentional about it. And you've got to use the tools to get there. And really look a little bit deeper than just doing that superficial and important things, but that first base level of exercise, diet, sleep, social relationships, all of that.
Right. Yeah. And so I'd also like, absolutely. And I also like to say, as an engineer, I thought I can figure this out. And I know that's a lot of lawyers too, but as an engineer, I'm like, I am used to figuring out problems, and I can do math and, create a spreadsheet and all this. I can figure this out. Like, what is not working here? I need to figure this out. And for the life of me, I could not figure it out. And I look back now and I don't regret any of it, but do I wish I could have figured it out a lot sooner than I did? Absolutely. And once I started diving in, once I had the courage to say, I need some help and I can't figure this out by myself. And I don't know what's going on here, but I need to do something because I don't like the way this is going. That is where I then took, that engineering curiosity, and just and I applied it to myself. And I said, why do I do this? Why do I do that? Why do I, why? And I was always asking those questions and then just diving into wherever that led me. And then along the way, talking about it with my therapist and then, eventually with my coach. And so it's the best work I've ever done. I have multiple degrees, and by far the work I did on myself was the most rewarding. And it was giving myself and my family the gift of the true me, the confident me, the funny me, the authentic me, the honest me. And now I feel like I'm not in a prison anymore. I really do have freedom and choice to be me. Right. Amidst the ocean, amidst the marathon, amidst the movie, it's all about, life. And so, if I were to give a piece of advice, please don't be afraid to dive in and do the work. And please find somebody that you can have that conversation with. You can always call the lab. I mean, even if it's just to say, I'm miserable. I don't know how to fix this. Where should I go? What should I do? Please call.
Yeah, or the EAP. I mean, we have multiple options.
Yeah,
it's great talking to you about this stuff, Pam. I could go on for hours, but I know
me
our
too.
time is so.
Yeah, me too. All right, everybody. We have used up all of our time for today. It feels like, Bill, we just barely scratched the surface too. But we thank you all for joining us on Legal Wellbeing in Action, and please tune in next month. And we thank you all for listening in.
Thank you for listening. This episode was produced by the State Bar of New Mexico's Wellbeing Committee and the New Mexico Judges and Lawyers Assistance Program. All editing and sound mixing was done by Blue Sky eLearn. Intro music is by Gil Flores. The views of the presenters are that of their own and are not endorsed by the State Bar of New Mexico. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment, or legal advice. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition.